Harry's Wife, part 75.4, The Downward Spiral. I've touched on this to a degree when I explained to you what the future holds for Harry and his wife, but this bears separate discussion because it enables you to understand more of what's going on with regard to the world of Harry's wife and the significant problem that she faces. She basically, driven by her narcissism, has gambled and is currently losing. She, of course, won't see it that way because her narcissism will shield her from it, but externally we can see that is the case. If her narcissism had guided her in a way to maintain the facade as best as possible, to look to fit in within the British royal family, to carve out a role within that family in the United Kingdom, supporting Harry, having 2 children, and essentially enabling the narcissism, of course, to appear in devaluing behaviours towards Harry behind closed doors, as it always does when it's the intimate partner primary source, but externally, if she was a more evolved narcissist, she would have maintained that facade of being pleasant, likeable, wouldn't have been engaging in making stupid pronouncements which become transparent and see-through, wouldn't have become engaged in so much of the grasping behaviour in terms of wanting that residual benefit that is money. You see, her narcissism isn't suited for the role that she believes that she should occupy. In effect, she's trying to win a race at Formula One while she's driving some small runaround that you would see in an urban environment. She thinks that she can take on the Formula One motor cars in her little runaround. She's not equipped to do it. Of course, the deluded nature of her narcissism drives her to believe that she can, but she's failing. A more evolved narcissist would have been able to merge into the British royal family, keep Harry on his leash. He would still be devalued because the intimate partner primary source is always devalued, and externally would have been able to portray herself as kind, caring, and helpful, considerate, compassionate, and being well liked, and there would be nothing or very little suggestion of the dark behaviours that go on behind closed doors, because her narcissism would ensure that nobody else would witness that, or if they did, they suitably would be manipulated to ensure that they kept stum, they remained silent. Her narcissism isn't up to the position that in effect she's been promoted to. She's been over-promoted beyond her ability. And what is happening is this. She makes these pronouncements and wants a particular lifestyle, but it needs to be funded by something. She actually joined an organisation, the British royal family, that would have funded it to a degree, both through the Queen's wealth, the inherited wealth that Harry has, and of course Prince Charles would help his son out, as he once was doing. But her narcissism drove her to want more. Her narcissism has driven her to assert control over those non-intimate secondary sources within the royal family, devaluing them. So the narcissists within the royal family themselves, of course, reject that assertion of control and say, no more, you're being cut off, we don't want anything to do with you. The non-narcissists are offended by the behaviour and retreat, Duchess of Cambridge being an example of that, Prince William also. And therefore, because of the behaviours resulting in responses from various narcissists in the royal family, non-narcissists, namely normals and empaths, this affected Harry's wife's need for control and forced her into a position of withdrawal so that she could keep a tight hold over Harry whilst rejecting the threat to control posed by the royal family at large, and thus to Canada and then to Monty Shitshow. However, her narcissism continues to want her to appear on the world stage. But that takes money. It takes money because 1. PR, 2. Security, 3. The general standard of living. She is not going to want to live in a trailer in the back garden of Oprah's. She wants her own pile. She wants her own gaff. She wants her own resplendent mansion with many rooms and thousands of toilets, as we all know. Therefore, the problem that she has is this, that having alienated an institution that would have been supportive, she has put herself in a position that she has to seek a degree of self-sufficiency. And we recall in earlier parts there was all this talk about being financially independent. But it's all very well doing that if you've got something to offer, but she hasn't. There's no talent there, although she believes that she's an author, she believes that she's an astronaut, a chef, whatever it might be, character trait acquisition. But other people can see that she isn't, and they're not going to keep buying it, and they're certainly not going to keep funding it. And therefore, she gets sucked into this vortex of a downward spiral, and it works like this. Her narcissism causes her to do more and more essentially ridiculous things which people can see. People don't become as interested. People actually actively criticise her behaviours. This affects her sense of control. Because this is happening on a world stage and not just in one room in somebody's house in the middle of nowhere, but is being witnessed by millions, maybe even hundreds of millions in certain instances, her narcissism has to do something about it, and therefore it causes her to need to issue the various PR puff pieces. This costs money. In order to get that money, deals must be struck, as we have seen with Netflix and Spotify, maybe with a perfume brand and so on and so forth. But then, there's nothing to deliver there. Those organisations will start to retreat. Therefore, that will also affect control. In order to try and negate the threats to control, alternative deals will be sought. In essence, her own brand will be prostituted all the more. Harry will find himself on the receiving end of the sharp tongue more and more and more. The threat to control manifests on a global scale. Therefore, a global international response is required. That takes money. The money is obtained by doing the deals. But there's nothing to add to those deals because there's no substance. The deals start to dry up. The criticisms continue. And then, how can those criticisms be addressed on a global scale? By PR. But there's nothing in the budget to fund it. And this is one of the problems that Harry's wife faces, is that because in essence her narcissism has caused her to overreach, and she's gambled on becoming some international woke star and has failed, this will result in repeated threats to her control. To counter that threat to control on an international scale, she has to utilise PR. The PR costs. At the moment, there's money, which also has to deal with security costs and also with the general standard of living, but there is not a bottomless pit. And as I mentioned, that residual benefit issue is something that's going to become exhausted vis-à-vis Prince Harry, resulting in seeking an alternative, but in the meanwhile creates a particular difficulty for Harry's wife. The more that she tries to assert control, the more that she will continue to cause problems because her narcissism will misfire. If she was asserting control on a local scale amongst her family, friends, neighbours, that kind of thing, as a mid-ranger she'd be far more effective at doing it. But her narcissism has catapulted her into a position of international fame and fortune, and quite simply, the narcissism isn't up to the job to keep her where she's got to. And therefore, it keeps fucking up. And it's becoming more and more noticeable. And each time that there is this cock-up, in order to try and remedy the cock-up, she needs to assert control, not just over her spouse, not just over a neighbour, not just a couple of members of the extended family, but over a large section of the world that takes an interest in these things, because the media keeps watching. And of course, there are those within the media that would like to see her crash and burn, and there are increasing numbers of people who would like to see her crash and burn amongst the general public, not because they're nasty, but because they see that she has brought it upon herself, and there is that sense of the necessity of justice and retribution, that she should have this impacted upon her as a consequence of what has occurred. And therefore, there are people waiting in the wings to see this particular outcome. The more that she tries to fight against it, the more problems she will cause for herself, because her narcissism hasn't evolved in that way to be able to see the manner in which it should be responding. She hasn't got that top-grade narcissism to help her. And instead, what will continue to be the case is that as she receives a threat to control on a global basis, she will then try and respond to that on a global basis. That requires money and assistance, which will start to peter out, and there will be a downward spiral. And this is also something that will also necessitate the requirement of getting somebody afresh, different to Prince Harry. In a way, it reminds one of Princess Leia talking to Grand Moff Tarkin, saying, in essence, the tighter you squeeze, the more star systems will slip through your grip. The harder she tries to assert control, the worse it is going to become for her, because she hasn't got the narcissism and the resources of a greater or an ultra to do it. And thus she is now embarking on her own downward spiral. Join me in part 75.5 as we enjoy more photo analysis so you understand what's actually going on below.